Welcome to Washington in Focus Daily. It is Wednesday, July 29th, 2026. I'm Carlene Johnson, the Center Square Washington's state government reporter. And in today's episode, Let's Go Washington has officially filed their appeal to the Public Investment Impact Disclosure Statement that would appear alongside their initiative that hopes to repeal the income tax. We'll get into that. We have Darren Littell with Let's Go Washington explaining why they think this is completely not what the AG is required to do. They don't believe at all this is an unbiased impact statement. And then, in case you missed it, there was some fireworks at last night's Storm game when we had some folks that were there in support of the protection of girls' sports appearing at the Storm game. And we had the co-owner of the Storm making some public comments that were not very flattering of folks that were there in support of the initiative to protect girls in sports. So it's basically folks from Let's Go Washington's initiative that have come out, and these girls that have come out in support of these that were there in attendance at the game last night, and they ended up being harassed, insulted by co-owners of the Storm. We're going to share that with you. And then finally, Freedom Foundation and the Teachers Alliance that helps educators across the country exit their teacher unions. There's another deadline coming up, and they recently held a forum, the Teachers Alliance did, and they have a number of educators from Washington State that have joined their alliance to get out of the Washington Education Association. So we have some response back from the Teachers Alliance as to the growing numbers of people here in Washington State that are getting out, educators, and why they are, and efforts as well by the folks with the NEA and the WEA, and why they are pushing so hard to make sure that education is not provided as to options to get out of the teachers' union. So let's dive in. The Let's Go Washington folks who are appealing the Attorney General's recently released public investment impact disclosure for Initiative 645 have provided some new information for us here at the Center Square. Basically, calling this impact statement that will accompany the I-645 on your ballot, saying this is nothing more than government advocacy masked as transparency. So the PIID statement to appear with the income tax repeal initiative on the ballot states this. I'll read this. This measure would decrease funding for public K-12 education, higher education, including universities and community colleges, and human services, primarily healthcare. But according to Let's Go Washington, that is not accurate at all because nothing is being cut from programs by voting yes for Initiative 645. Now, remember, this is the millionaire's tax that will, for 2028 earnings to be paid in 2029, take 9.9% of earnings above $1 million or combined household earnings above $1 million. But there's nothing there yet. So the contention from Let's Go Washington is that you can't fairly state on the ballot that we're cutting funding when there's no funding yet, as a result of this, because we don't have any money from the income tax initiative as yet. So here is Darren Littell in a Tuesday interview with the Center Square.
It was pretty clear that right off the bat, it's not accurate because nothing is being cut from programs in through by voting yes for Initiative 645. All the funding is there, and the only thing that we're cutting is an income tax. So Initiative 645, the only thing it cuts is an income tax, and it's speculation as far as potential future impact. And the way that the PIID is written, it's supposed to be for actual impact. And so if you look at what 645 does, the only thing is it cuts a $10 million plus government bureaucracy from being set up. So in fact, it saves money for folks and it returns it to the budget. And so the statement should actually be saying that this is going to increase funding for the general fund in Washington State. And so that's what we filed our appeal for, and we're looking forward to having the hearing. The additional savings is going to come from Department of Revenue hires that aren't going to need to be made, from setting up a bureaucracy that's not going to be needed, from having to defend a lawsuit against an unconstitutional income tax. Those are all the things that are happening right now. Those are the only things that have actual appropriations tied to them from the 2026 budget. And so everything else is just speculation. And the state has held over and over again that you can't hold a future legislature to what is currently going on. And so anything that's speculation shouldn't be there. And the other thing that I think is important is, I don't know, it just doesn't make sense. You cannot cut money that doesn't exist. How can you possibly cut a budget that doesn't exist, funding that doesn't exist? But the PIID and the way that the Attorney General wrote it, they're pretending like this tax has already been enacted. It's been bringing in money for years. It's just not the case. It's still 2 years away from being in law enacted.
Now, Littell at LGW argues that ultimately the repeal of the income tax measure will save taxpayers money. And he's talking about the savings that would come from the Department of Revenue investments. Right in the bill for the income tax initiative, 6346, says they have to hire a bunch of folks to work at the Department of Revenue. Folks that will have to, figure out when folks are paying this, millionaires that are paying this tax, they have to figure out how much they owe, where that goes. So there's a whole giant fiscal note attached to this. So their contention is that if we don't have to hire those folks, we're going to be saving money. We also don't have to pay for hiring attorneys to defend the income tax in court. You're probably well aware there's already a constitutional challenge to the income tax. So the contention from Let's Go Washington is it's ultimately going to save money to repeal this because you won't have to hire all these people for the Department of Revenue and you won't have to pay a bunch of, taxpayer funded attorneys to fight this. And so, as we reported last week, there is a lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of the PIID law that was passed in 2022 that places an impact disclosure statement alongside ballot initiatives. So we'll be following that. That was filed by Arthur West on July 24th in Thurston County Superior Court. He is seeking expedited review for that. He told me he was hoping for an August 7th court date potentially, because remember, it is by August 21 that language has to be finalized on the Washington ballots for November. And so all this has to be, played out pretty quickly in the courts for any of these challenges. So Littell at Let's Go Washington told me he believes that voters are smarter than the AG's office contends, because the AG's office says we got to put these PIIDs up because voters don't understand that if they repeal the income tax measure through this initiative, that they're going to be impacting state budgets. And LGW says that's not the case. We think voters are a heck of a lot smarter than that.
This is, government advocacy masked as transparency. They have poll tested and looked to see what the most damaging statements could possibly be. And then that's what ends up being printed in this public statement. And it's ridiculous, honestly. And the fact that they put one side on there from somebody who is openly campaigning against this, they want to keep the income tax. uh, Nick Brown has said, hey, this income tax is a good thing, and he's been doing everything he can to make sure that people are paying the income tax here in Washington State. And so, do you think he's going to write a fair and balanced statement? It's silly, really, and it's clear that he has done everything he can to make sure that this is as damaging as possible to the initiative effort to repeal the income tax.
So, a hearing on Let's Go Washington's appeal to this statement that would appear alongside their initiative to potentially repeal the income tax. A hearing on that could be held next week. It's going to be Thurston County Superior Court, a decision on that. Maybe late next week. We wait for some confirmation from the court on that. And again, ballots for the November election expected to be finalized by August 21st. So the clock is ticking on all of that. Now, the Seattle Storm. I've never been to a WNBA game, I confess, but the one last night was apparently a memorable one. It was the Indiana Fever in town for the Seattle Storm game. And there were teenage fans there that were wearing XXXY athletics shirts, some of them holding signs in support of Sophie Cunningham, who plays for the Fever. So she was in town. And if you don't follow social media, I'll just tell you, Sophie Cunningham has been very outspoken in recent weeks about supporting the protection of girls in sports, including basketball. That there shouldn't be biological males, there should not be trans athletes playing in girls' sports. She's gotten a lot of criticism. She's also, gotten a lot of attention on the national media stage. So when she was going to be in town last night, given the fact we have this initiative appearing on our ballot, there were a lot of folks here who were like, hey, there's an opportunity to show up there at the game in support of Sophie Cunningham and let her know we really appreciate her stance on this on the national stage. So there was a young woman there, a 16-year-old girl by the name of Annalie Wilson. Now, Annalie is going to be a junior this next year at Eastmont High School in Wenatchee. She, when she was in 8th grade, became the first face in Washington state for the protection of girls' sports. She lost out, earning the top placement in a statewide competition, a track competition, to a trans athlete. And her family was brave enough at that point, even though she was very young at the time, to say, we want to speak out against this. And she was the encouragement for others in our state and then nationally who have spoken out about this subject since then. So Annalie was at the game last night at the Seattle Storm and holding up a sign in support of Sophie Cunningham and saying, thank you for speaking up to protect girls' sports. Well, that did not go over well with the co-owner of the Seattle Storm, a woman by the name of Celeste Keaton, who, I don't have it on video, but according to multiple people that I've spoken to today and social media sources have posted, that the co-owner of the Storm, Celeste Keaton, cursed out Annalie and some other girls who were there sitting in the front row saying, thank you, Sophie, for supporting girls' sports, calling them at one point effing insane. So Annalie left in tears. Brandy Cruz with the Undivided podcast was kind enough to share this video with us today so that we could show you her conversation with Annalie and another girl who was there in support of the protection of girls' sports at that game last night. So here's part of that conversation after the game.
We were just sitting there with our signs that said, we love Sophie, thank you, Sophie, for speaking up. And so we were holding them, just watching the game. Again, we were being super great. We hadn't said anything to anyone else. We were being super respectful. We were just holding our signs and cheering for both teams. And this older lady, comes up to us. And she comes up to us, and at first I think she's going to be nice. And then she asked, what are you guys doing? Something like that. And then it was Jesus loves everyone. That's what she told us. And I was like, oh, I know. I'm religious. I know. I know. Nice. Yeah. And she's like, oh, I hope Jesus can forgive you for what sin you've done. And something like that. And then she told us that we were effing insane. And that we
and she's and she went effing insane.
Yeah.
She's like, you better stop this.
And stop. Yeah.
And
for you guys
I
to
hope
come
God
here
can
and
save
pull
you.
This.
I did reach out to the Seattle Storm for a comment on how things went last night. I got no response to my phone message or email. If I receive that, we'll share that with you in tomorrow's episode. But Let's Go Washington did provide a response to what transpired at the game last night. And this is a comment from Hallie Balch with Let's Go Washington. She said, adults attacking high school sports for supporting Sophie Cunningham is pathetic. These girls had the courage to show up. The grown adults that cursed them out and verbally harassed them should feel pretty proud for making high schoolers cry. Very brave. The no hate crowd keeps showing us who the real bigots are. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot more on this in the days to come. Hopefully, any response from the Seattle Storm, I can provide you an update in tomorrow's episode. And now another deadline is fast approaching. My gosh, it's almost the end of July already. So we're in August. So come September 1 is when Washington state teachers, the window closes for them to opt out of paying union dues if they object to the politics of the Washington Education Association. So here in Washington, um, many of those politics of WEA support very left leaning ideologies. Some, like we were just talking to, the WEA is funding the political action group behind the effort to tell people don't support the initiative that would protect girls' sports. So a lot of teachers have opted out. A lot of teachers have said, wait a minute, this is just, you're going too far with ideology. I don't want to pay into the union anymore. You may recall that prior to 2018, the teachers and other public union employees were beholden to their unions as a condition of employment. But we had that condition, or we had that ruling, I should say, in 2018 from the U.S. Supreme Court, the Janus decision that said, as a condition of employment, you don't have to be a member of your union. And so, as a consequence, many public employees have opted out of their union. And earlier this month, hundreds of teachers, including some from Washington, gathered in Dallas for the annual Teacher Freedom Alliance. Now, the Teacher Freedom Alliance is an offshoot of the Freedom Foundation, and they support teachers who've opted out of their unions to kind of help them navigate. Here's how you still have, at no cost to yourself, liability coverage, because the union tells teachers, you don't want to opt out. Yeah, you're going to lose your, insurance coverage. Well, Teacher Freedom Alliance says, no, you're not. We've got you covered. So that's one of the many reasons why some teachers who've opted out have then joined the alliance. So I spoke with Ryan Walters today. He is the Chief Executive Officer of the Teacher Freedom Alliance. And he told me that many teachers who opt out um, convey they were hesitant to do so, even though they might have been considering it for some time, were hesitant, even if they disagree with the politics of the union, because they are afraid of the very real backlash.
We hear this on a daily basis from teachers of, we are really afraid of what the repercussions are if we leave because the unions have been so heavy-handed. We've seen examples of them, doxing teachers. We've seen examples of them showing up or sending individuals to their classrooms or their homes to confront them, saying they're not with the cause, they're not supportive of public education. If they don't join the union, they're traitors, they're scabs, all of these things. And most teachers go, I just want to do my job. And so you have a lot of teachers that struggle with, do I really want to deal with all of that? And so that's where we try to step in and say, listen, we can provide professional development that you need, liability insurance that you need. And again, when we talk about professional development, we're very much an organization that says, what would make you a better teacher? That's what we want to offer. So reading instruction on how to teach American history, how to create good citizens out of your students, things like that are what we really emphasize. And so we hear it from teachers all the time. Well, will you help us navigate this world if we leave the union and are targeted, because we see it so often, and we help teachers through that entire process as well.
Now, the WEA contends that Freedom Foundation and the Teachers Freedom Alliance were to weaken public education and to dismantle public sector unions. And they accuse the group of sending these unsolicited pieces of mail to teachers' homes, they say, visiting work sites to pressure members into dropping their membership. But Walters told me the teachers' unions are themselves going to great lengths to prevent them from simply providing information. Like, here's what the teachers union says they can offer you. Here's what you might want to consider if you opt out. And so they have tried to provide this level playing field, if you will. But there are several states that are working against that effort.
We've seen Oregon State pass a law that says the Freedom Foundation, the Teacher Freedom Alliance can't contact teachers because we're, acting as if we're a union. No, we're not. We're not a union. We're an organization that provides these opportunities for teachers. But it shows you, and just last week at the Teachers Union National Conference, one of the resolutions they passed was to have states push legislation to not allow us to advertise in those states. And again, what they want is they want a monopoly. And what we're saying is we're all about freedom. If you want to join our organization, great. If you don't, that's fine too. But we want to give you the opportunity to say, if you want to be part of a professional organization, you should be able to pick from a suite, from a menu of those organizations, and especially not be pushed into one that is pushing a left wing agenda. Again, if we're about getting the classrooms back to academic excellence, we want more groups out there doing what we're doing. Again, we're happy to see other organizations do that, but we want teachers to have that freedom, those options. And the Janus Supreme Court ruling was very clear. You don't have to join a teachers union to be a teacher. And yet the teachers union continues to try to box out any competition and not even allow teachers the information to make their own decision. And I'll tell you why that is, of course. They don't want to lose the money that comes from their automatic union dues. So for them, any kind of competition takes from their bottom line, takes from their political power, and that's why they fight this so aggressively.
Now, I did reach out to the Washington Education Association for comment on these criticisms from the Teacher Freedom Alliance and Freedom Foundation ahead of just about a month from now is the deadline for teachers in Washington state to have their annual opt out period. And I did not receive a response, but I will be putting up an article on our Center Square Washington page. If they do respond, I will be certain to include that in the article. So that's it for today's episode of Washington in Focus Daily for this Wednesday. I hope to see you again on Thursday.